What up? What up? Do, do, do. What's happening? We are just popping on here. First time going live on YouTube, so this is a little new experience. We previously, oh, I don't think hold on, my headphones aren't connecting. That's fine. We'll go without them. So first time here going live on YouTube. Yeah, we used to go live quite a bit on some of the other platforms, but just wanted to pop on here, wanted to test it out and kind of see. I was just filming some videos here for this week and thought we'd just pop on. We could talk about the videos that I was making. This one was on patellofemoral pain syndrome, which is a very common injury in runners. It's actually funny because it's actually typically called runner's knee. Those kind of like diagnoses are really bad in general just because they don't really explain too much. Like if you have an activity plus pain, that's not helpful because you can have a lot of different injuries when you run. And so saying that somebody has runner's knee is not really all that helpful. But when we look at patellofemoral pain in general, got a little model here. And so when we think of the patellofemoral joint, which is really just a fancy way of talking about the joint in between the patella, which is your kneecap, and then we also have the femur here, which is your leg bone, and then in between, let's see if we can get a good little image there. That joint right in through here, that's the patellofemoral joint. And so generally what happens with patellofemoral pain is that there's compression and irritation in those tissues in between the kneecap and the leg, and that's what leads to patellofemoral pain. And generally in runners, that joint itself has a lot of load through it. With each step, there's just compression as you kind of take a step, land, all that load goes at the knee. And so that's typically the reason why those with, or runners typically experience patellofemoral pain syndrome is because it's an overload condition. Just that joint gets irritated and overloaded, and that leads to the pain. And so generally, when we look at rehab for patellofemoral pain syndrome, we're looking at one, increasing the quad strength, and then also increasing the glute strength as well. What's a little bit interesting when you think about the glutes, whenever somebody talks about glutes and running, it always has to do with, well, we're looking at the leg and we're taking a step here, and then we have internal rotation and adduction of the leg here, and that leads to the irritation in that joint here. What's interesting though is that like glute strengthening doesn't actually change that movement with running, even though that's probably the biggest misconception, because if you ask anybody, it's glute med strengthening to limit that range of motion. But it actually doesn't change, like strengthening the glutes doesn't actually change that range of motion when you run. And so if you're actually looking at decreasing that irritation, how do you do it? Well, we talked about increasing both quad strength and glute strength, but they actually don't tend to change the movement that causes the patellofemoral pain injury or pain. What you actually need to do is increase your step rate. And the reason why is because when you think about step rate, most of the time when patellofemoral pain happens is that as you're running, you start to get fatigued and you reduce your step rate. And the problem with that is that with each step, what ends up happening is there's more load on that patellofemoral joint. And then over time, that increases the load and causes the irritation. So basically what you're trying to do is that, one, if you run to fatigue and your step rate reduces, it's really hard to keep your step rate up when you're fatigued, that by default, right? But if you can actually increase your step rate by 5 to 10%, it actually reduces the load at the knee by around like 20-ish%. So like the return on increasing your step rate is actually quite high. And when we talk about step rate, it basically means that we're going to take quicker steps, smaller, quicker steps. A lot of times, and one of the biggest errors in new runners is that when they run, they want to take larger steps because they're trying to run as fast as they can. So they have this kind of like bounding kind of running pattern. And the problem is that just increases the load at the ankle and at the knee and at the hip as well. And so by taking smaller steps, that actually reduces the load at the knee and all the other joints, and actually just cleans up a lot of your running biomechanics. So in general, we're looking at increasing your step rate when you run, especially for patellofemoral pain. So super helpful. That was basically what the video was about. We did a little bit of exercises for it as well. The exercises, like we were saying before, we're looking at quad strengthening. If it's a really sensitive knee that just isn't tolerating much load, then doing something like a wall sit is super helpful, just because you can control how deep into the knee flexion you're loading. And so initially you might be a little bit more higher up, so that way you're avoiding those compressive loads at the knee. And then that's just a great place to start. And then as you build up tolerance, you can sit lower and lower into that wall sit to build up tolerance to those compressive loads. And then obviously once you're able to do a wall sit, then you want to start to add movement with something like a knee extension or maybe a squat to help start strengthening both the quads as well as the glutes with the squat movement. So that's typically like the rehab progression for patellofemoral pain. Obviously another exercise that I really like is actually a lunge. And when we look at the lunge, the reason why I like it is that if we look at the knee joint here, boop. So again, what if wall sits hurt? Currently pain just sitting at work. Yeah. So like when you do a wall sit, right, there's some amount of knee flexion, right? Otherwise you're kind of just leaning against the wall, and that's not going to be great. I mean, like, it's something, but it's not great necessarily. And so there's two strategies that you can typically take. If the knee just isn't tolerating any sort of compressive load. So let's say we're doing a wall, don't want to get caught on my sweatshirt here. So let's say we're doing a wall sit and we have, I don't know, maybe like 10 to 20 degrees of knee flexion here. And that's just too much load. It's just too irritating. Well, maybe we do a straight leg exercise where we're just sitting on the ground, lifting the leg up, working a little bit more of the hip flexor, but you are still getting some quadricep activity with that. It's not the most direct way of loading it, but you do get some. The other option is a standing knee extension. And so basically what you would do is the band would be back here, anchored this way. And what you would do is just push the knee back. And so like that. And so that's called a terminal knee extension. And that's just one way to start to load the quads. If the quads just, the knee is just not tolerating anything, all that's irritating, then maybe we just go with some glute strengthening instead, where that way you're not moving the knee quite as much. You have to offload it because it's just too irritated. That's another option. And so whenever we're looking at like rehab programs, right, we're just looking for like what's the load that's initially tolerated and then go from there. Sometimes you just can't load the knee, right? And that just happens. But, if you can, that's usually like the quickest way to recovery because it means it can tolerate some load. But if it can't, then, you try loading something else, or you load the other side. Maybe you do some hamstring stuff or some glute stuff instead, just to start. Also, one of the things with patellofemoral pain is that it's called moviegoer sign, which I guess people back in the day, they really enjoyed sitting at the movies, and so they'd get pain. And it's just because when you're sitting with your knee roughly flexed to 80, 90 degrees, and that compressive load over like 2 to 3 hours leads to the pain. So generally, if you're sitting throughout the day, keeping the knee a little bit less flexed can be helpful, or just kind of like getting it to move around and not just sit with it flexed for hours on end, because that compressive loads just cause irritation. Yeah, of course. Would prot hamstring curls, would it be low load on the patellofemoral joint? That's a good question. You said prone? Prone should be okay. Obviously, like if you start to flex the knee to 90 degrees, so even if you're prone, bloop, so foot's that way, we're prone this way. If you're still here, that's still a little bit of compressive load. Not that much, but if you're doing prone hamstring curls and you're able to flex to that degree, you're probably fine because it's just not that much load. There's more, how to describe this? There's more compressive loads, which is where the kneecap actually pushes into the femur, versus tensile loads, which is where it's pulling against. So you're having the compressive loads, but you're not having the tensile loads with a prone hamstring curl. Sorry if that's a little too technical, but it should be tolerated. Oh, sorry, my laptop behind went dark and I was using it for light. And so it should be okay. But everybody responds differently. Some people can tolerate, some people can't just because of the compressive load. So it really just depends. But again, that's just a great example of like, you're looking for a load that is tolerated. And so even though like, I think in, most rehab cases, we'd be like, if we're going to plan something for the initial stages of patellofemoral pain, you're probably not having a lot of hamstring strengthening high up on the list of priorities. However, if we can start moving the knee, even if it's contracting the opposite side, which is the hamstrings, well, then we're still getting some load through that knee, which is just a great starting place. So, and obviously when we're looking at like returning to actually running and stuff like that, hamstring strengthening is going to come into play later in the rehab. It's just initially you might not put an emphasis on it, but if that's what you can tolerate and that's what you can do, that's a place to start. Yeah. Rehab is just usually kind of messy sometimes. It's funny because when I look at like most of the comments on my videos, it's how many reps, how many sets, how often. And when we look at like, I guess if we look at the overview of the research, right, there's not a good answer. We don't know what is the optimal amount of loading for various conditions. Most of the research typically uses somewhere between 3 sets of 10 to maybe 3 sets of 15. But how much load is that? What's the person's training history, right? If you're a runner that's used to doing a lot of hamstring stuff, maybe that's tolerable. But if it's, if you're just not someone who goes to the gym often, it might cause some irritation. It might cause some irritation just in general. Or if you're like post ACL. So it's the rehab is always a little bit funny when you're trying to figure out like what the load is. And so not that it's guesswork necessarily, because that's probably not the best way to phrase it, but there's a little bit of trial and error when it comes to initially starting most rehab programs. You just got to figure out what load you can tolerate and then gradually build up from there. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what my last video was on. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm trying to. Well, I mean, I'm trying a live, which is a very interesting. It's just a different medium, right? I like it being able to have a conversation and be able to answer questions in real time. There's a lot of comments on videos, and so it's hard to always keep up with them. After so many videos, there's a couple comments. And so it's nice being able to actually talk through them, and also like some things that are just easier to explain on a Q&A. So planning on doing more Q&As. It's funny because I actually wanted to do more Q&As a really, really long time, or at least go live. And I just never really set it up to do it. It was funny because it's actually the reason why I bought a new camera, is because I wanted to be able to stream. And I think I've had my camera now for maybe 6 months. And I'm not even streaming on it. I'm streaming on my phone right now. So, but that's the goal. That's the goal, is to start streaming more, and just seeing how it kind of goes. Because it's easier to have these kind of conversations. And I'm trying to figure out. I named this one running repairs because obviously like my channel is a little bit more geared towards running and running injury management. And so we'll see if you guys have suggestions on what I should title this series. Right now it's running repairs. We have another one scheduled for next weekend, which will be on proximal hamstring tendinopathy, which will be interesting because that was probably my start for YouTube, I think, or like my bigger videos on YouTube have been on proximal hamstring tendinopathy, and there's always lots of questions and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be good. But if there's topics you guys want to see, or just kind of themes in general, oh, I would love to do some collabs. Yeah, I should reach out to see. It's funny because like a lot of my clinical friends that I know, a lot of them don't necessarily like not a lot stream. Some of them are content creators, but not all that many. Does seem like there's a lot of podcasts though, which I think obviously do really well because you can talk about all the nuance, you can go into depth about everything. So that's a great point. I'll have to reach out to some and kind of see who. Rehab Science. I forget what his name is. Um, but I've seen some of the videos. They're good. They're good. Yeah, a lot of good people posting some good information. There's also some people not posting great information. Um, but that's the internet. And so, yeah, gotta, yeah, I'll have to reach out to some and see. But yeah, so this was kind of mostly just a test to kind of see how live streaming kind of goes, um, and see. I think one is I need to charge my AirPods. That probably would have been a great start. I actually haven't like I don't know if I've listened to a lot of Tom's podcasts. I've seen a lot of his Instagram posts. Tom's a great guy, super smart. I think he's running physio, right? Um, yeah, great source of information. I don't know if I know Brody. I don't know if I do or not. Um, I know, like for me personally, let's see here. I used to listen to a lot of Adam Meakin's podcasts, but I don't know if he's actually podcasting as much anymore. Same thing with Greg Lehman. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I haven't really been following a lot of like physios for podcasts recently. It's for me myself, like I'm not I'm not an auditory learner. It's mostly because I listen to podcasts when I drive, and it's really hard to focus. Like I remember I thought I was going to listen to like a lot of like the JAMA podcasts. They're too complex to be driving at the same time and listening to all that kind of stuff. But yeah, all good people. I don't know. Do you know if is Tom posted? I guess I can look it up. I just don't know if he's. Let's see here. Running physio. Is it Running Physio podcast? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I don't know if he's posted in a while. What up, everyone? Welcome. Was just talking about patellofemoral pain because that's the video that I had just filmed. But yeah, if you guys have questions, let me know. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There only seems to be, because I know E3 is another one that they consistently post a lot of podcasts. I'm trying to think of others. Um, yeah, yeah. I'll have to let me look at this one. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. Podcasting for me, because I've thought about like, oh, what was there was a platform that you used to be able to do podcasts on. Um, Shoot, I forgot the name of it, but I was just never. I don't know. I guess I can talk for a while. That's actually probably true. Anybody that's like listened to me or like it's funny because when I film videos, most people are like, oh, like it always sounds like not polished. Polished isn't the right word. Um, but like, man, there are so many errors. Like for I don't know, 1 or 2 minute video, like it's a good like 20-30 minutes of filming. Mostly because I can't like articulate things as properly as I'd like to. Um, and so it's funny because yeah, there's tons of footage of all this stuff, but um, yeah. Let's see here. We're doing ankles pretty soon here. Want to do a video on chronic ankle instability, which will be good. It's funny because when you look at like ankle sprains in general are like you would think they're pretty straightforward, right? Like the most common ankle sprain is inversion ankle sprain. Oh gosh, don't tear anything here. And what happens with an ankle sprain is that the anterior talofibular ligament, which is the ligament that goes right here, that's the most commonly injured ankle ligament. And it's usually pretty straightforward, right? You twist your ankle. Sometimes you feel a pop, sometimes you don't. Maybe there's some swelling and some bruising. Um, uh, and the treatment is relatively straightforward. You're trying to gradually increase the strength of the muscles around it. So, trying to do some banded work. If you can walk, that's great. Obviously, initially, you want to make sure that there's not a fracture. But what's interesting about ankle sprains is that about 40% of those who have an ankle sprain go on to develop chronic ankle instability. And so they might feel like the ankle is giving out on them, they don't have the stability, they don't have the strength, something like that. And so it's interesting because like we don't have a whole lot of conditions where we have like this idea of like a sequela basically like that if you don't do anything it's potentially going to lead to something like that, but chronic ankle instability is one of those things where the ankle becomes unstable, and it really just highlights like our rehab process leading up to that probably isn't adequate. And I think maybe it's partially because of the simplicity of an ankle sprain that, if I just let it go for a while and, I just rest it, then it'll heal and recover on its own. And then when you go to challenge it again, you either go for a run, you are jumping around, you're playing pickleball, you're doing whatever. And that ankle all of a sudden it's not there for you, right? Like it just feels unstable. It feels like it's going to give out. You're constantly rolling it. You just don't have the strength. And so really making sure that when you do have an ankle sprain that you're rehabbing it properly. I think one of the most common things that I hear is people will rehab an ankle for a week, 2 weeks, something like that. But if you look at just general like strength training principles, 6 to 8 weeks is generally what you need to build up strength. And so when you look at tendon issues, typically they're a lot longer. Like most rehab programs need to be about 3 months. So 1 to 2 weeks of strengthening probably isn't going to be sufficient. And so working on a couple videos here on chronic ankle instability, which will be good. Yeah. So got a couple videos coming up here. And we'll see. Was gonna do one. I didn't like the script on minimalist shoes. Obviously, like barefoot running is it's kind of a big thing. But it's funny because like I feel like the pendulum has shifted quite a bit from like a minimalist, really thin profile shoe to like a Hoka, which is like a really thick shoe. And so it's funny that like there's such like a difference between the two, right? And interestingly, like I like minimalist shoes for just like general everyday walking around and all that kind of stuff, just because I do I think that one, the sensory component is really good. If you think about like most shoes, you don't get the feedback. Will you post a recording for these? Like the live videos, these ones? Um, I probably will. I probably won't post this one, mostly because it's just me rambling and I didn't structure very much to it. But in the future, I will most likely post these lives. This one, like I was saying, mostly just a Q&A, very informal type of thing. But I think in the future, what I'll do is I'll have kind of like the first, I don't know, 15 minutes maybe, as something a little bit more prepared. We'll go through maybe some anatomy and some mechanisms and a rehab approach for a various topic, and then open it up maybe like for a little bit of Q&A. So that way there's that interaction and all that kind of stuff, part of that. But this one, mostly just me rambling about something. Nobody needs to hear this rambling for that long, I guess. But in the future, I definitely will. And then I think if there's like topics or questions that are specifically part of it, I'll also make specific videos for those that'll be a little bit more detail oriented on everything. So that'll be the goal overall. Yeah, and I know like I've been playing around with some of the settings. Like you can do highlights for lives, and so I actually don't know how that works, but we'll figure it out. And so if there's something during these like live sessions that we could highlight to, if there was something that was said that was helpful, we'll do something like that. So yeah, that's the goal though. I will post them. It's funny because for vertical streaming, this is the first one, but way long ago, I actually did more horizontal live streaming. There was, I think I did one on maybe foam rolling. I don't remember, but it was something like that, and so maybe that's something we'll do. Maybe we'll do like a live step-by-step type thing, and we'll go over maybe rehab for something specific, and then that way we can go through general stuff if we're looking at I don't know, chronic ankle instability, and looking at like how do we build up proprioceptive exercises, how do we improve balance, like what strengthening exercises should we do, and so we can go through some of those, which I think will just need to be a little bit more structured. I'll write a progression and stuff like that, and so that's actually a good idea. Maybe I'll write that down. I don't know what to call that. Injury walkthrough? I think that'll actually be a good option there. I'll have to figure out actually. Yeah. I think that'd actually be helpful. What do you guys think? Yeah. I think that would potentially be good. Do. Awesome. Cool. Well, I think I am going to finish editing those videos now. Thanks everyone for joining. This was a lot of fun. Mostly just working on the tech, making sure everything kind of works and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, appreciate all of you. I think recently we crossed 12,000 subscribers, which is pretty crazy. I never thought this channel would reach 12,000, let alone like, I don't know, anything less than that. And so pretty cool. I think we're actually closing on 13,000, which is wild. So thank you everybody for subscribing, liking, commenting, posting, everything like that. Really, really amazing. And so look forward to doing some more lives here. Next one is scheduled for next Sunday. That'll be on proximal hamstring tendinopathy. If there's things that you guys want to see, leave them in the comments on a video. And yeah, thanks for joining, and see you guys later.